the significance of this agreement, which the Israeli government signed with the Trump administration a week before the election? What about the timing? How significant is this? How is it going to translate on the ground?
Well, potentially it is very significant because it is siding with those interpretations of international law that say Israel does have a right to settle in the lands that the Palestinians want for an independent future state. And obviously, the Trump administration and also Israel thinks that Trump may not win next week's American elections, and they're rushing through a couple of extra measures now because they don't think that a Biden presidency would necessarily be as favorable to Israel as the Trump presidency.
Okay, but we have a number of United Nations and Security Council resolutions regarding the settlements, and there is like a consensus in Europe, around the world, about the settlements, that they are illegitimate, illegal under international law. How are they going to get around this?
Well, unfortunately, international law does not always, might is right, as they say. International law is not always the only factor. So it's very difficult to undo what's done. And we see this all around the world in the last 100 years. Many borders changed, either through conflict or otherwise, and they were never reversed, or people were moved, and that was that. And international law is important, but simply condemning it or asking the United Nations, which is not a very effectual body. I mean, do other governments listen to the United Nations? They do not. My strong advice to the Palestinian leadership is not to condemn, but to sit down and negotiate, even if they're in a weak position, with Israel, with the United States, whoever wins the election, Biden or Trump, and try and get the best deal they can, the Palestinian leadership. By simply waiting, or by complaining, or by citing laws and other things, it's not helping. So I think that they are letting history pass them by, and the Palestinians are in danger of being a forgotten conflict like Northern Cyprus. Northern Cyprus is inside the European Union, Cyprus. It is occupied by Turkey, 40,000 Turkish settlers, and even the Europeans never mention it anymore. It's done. That's it. They pushed the Greeks out and they moved Turks in to Northern Cyprus. So I think the Palestinian leadership should stop listening to their so-called friends in the West, like John Kerry, who told Abbas not to negotiate for the last 4 years. It's a terrible mistake. The Palestinian leadership needs to negotiate, and they need to be realistic and get what they can, because by waiting, the Israelis and the Americans and others are just making declarations, and they will find interpretations of international which are on their side, because there is a consensus, but it's not unanimous. There are other interpretations of international law about whether there was even a Palestinian state and what was the legal status of these territories. Was it Jordanian? Was it British? Was it Turkish? Was it Jewish originally? So there are different interpretations of international law. So in any event, whatever the law says, it's politics, it's reality. In my view, the Palestinian leadership should resume negotiations straight after the American election, whoever wins it.
Okay, my final question is, some, including some Israelis, are saying that this kind of agreement will only strengthen the extreme right wing in Israel, the settlers, the Naftali Bennett, these people. Which will make peace even much more less likely. What do you say?
Yes, I think it does. But my answer is, again, that if you look at the Israeli left and the Israeli center, they're very busy on other issues to do with coronavirus and economics and religion and state and so on. The Palestinian leadership need to reach out to the wider Israeli population and say, we really want peace. So I'll give you a small example. In the UAE and in Bahrain that made agreements with Israel in the last few weeks, A lot of simple things are done, like there are going to be football matches between UAE teams and Israeli teams. They're going to be joint competitions and music videos and so on. The Palestinian leadership needs to show the Israeli left and the Israeli center that it really wants genuine peace, not just complaining and so on, not just boycotting. And I believe that the Israeli right will be weakened compared to the Israeli center and the Israeli left. In the end, the Palestinians, to make peace, need the backing of Israelis to elect a government that will make the concessions. They need a government that will make concessions. So to strengthen the Israeli center and the Israeli left, they need gestures. So you see Israelis now quite happy with people from UAE and Bahrain and so on, Dubai, because they're kind of small gestures of friendship and this kind of stuff. Not even political gestures, just recognize, like, I don't know, even about the Holocaust and all kinds of things. So I think that they need to do a bit of public relations also with the Israeli population, because the Israeli left and center are not against the Palestinians, but they kind of lost interest in the issue. They're busy with coronavirus lockdown and this kind of thing. So they need a complete rethink, and I honestly don't think the present Palestinian leadership in Ramallah is capable of doing this. There needs a younger, more realistic leadership.
All right, Tom. Thank you very much. That's very good.